Go live. Good Lord, that's not good. Hello, everyone. Right then. Hello. Now, I'm going to start off today with a small preface. I'm still coughing. I'm not quite so snotty. But if I dive for the door, it's because I'm going to get the snot out of the door. And I am doing this because honestly, I am the world's worst patient, and I get bored, and you have no idea how bored I get being in bed. I have quite literally read some region of, well, let's put it this way. I have quite a lot of Glyn Stewart books. I have read every single one multiple times. And I've read a load of history books multiple times. So yeah, a lot of reading. Anyway, it's been fun. It's been fun. Now, today's video is slightly different than I was expecting to make it, but it's actually going to be quite interesting, I hope. I won't be going massively late, though. I will say this from the get-go. My plan is to finish by about 10 o'clock, and that's basically the idea is I can keep going for that long. I can keep going for that long. I will also note that I have used standard definitions at certain points of things. So, hello, 90s everyone. You've got 90 questions for Sunday. Those pills. Those pills. Got some more pills around here somewhere. I'm about 4 different types of pills. Last time I checked. Oh yeah. No, those are cakes. What am I having pills? Alex, you can't have lost your pills already. You can't have lost your other pills already. It's not sensible to keep losing the pills. To be fair, those are the pills these are the pills I take 4 times a day, and each one in pairs. I've got other pills which I'm supposed to take once a day. I appear to have lost a pack already, which is really strange because I had them here because I drank the Vine Brew from that glass. Give me a second. Just a second while I check up on pills. That's better. Where are the pills? No. Well, that's always good. I've already managed to lose some of my pills. I'll find them. I'm just taking enough pills I'm going to rattle soon. Oh, there they are. See? Found them. Oh. This is the joy when you cause fun when you go into the doctors and they go, "We haven't seen you a long time." I'm not quite sure. It's when your the GP you're seeing says, "We've got notes that you're kind of like you are like a farmer." Okay, in that if you're coming in, you're probably at death's door. Wouldn't sound quite that bad. If I'm actually bothering to come to this particular surgery, I must be pretty ill. Anyway. So, which pills was it actually this time? I've had those. Had those at 6. Those. Hello, Night City everyone. Hello, Carver Gasberg. Hello, Makakuch. Hello, Team Locker. Hello, Ruhnon. Hello, John Shea. Hello, Frank Barnwell. Hello, Blackman Maximus. Hello, Tanner Filica. Hello, Jonathan Burrow. Hello, Lions. Hello, Bug Guy. Hello, DG40. Hello, Vice Admiral Nelson. Hello, Paul Amos. Hello, Paul. By the way, something should be in the post heading towards you. I've told you that one. Hello, Sue Mitchell. Hello, Nyoku 447 Hello, Carl Gasberg, Steve Richards. Once he takes pills, he'll travel. Yeah. I'm gonna point out where to find out more information on models A6M the Battle of Bismarck Sea. No, but I did have the greatest conversation I think I've ever had with a GP who insisted I was having a low stress life, and I went, I'm working out how to move house. My 80-year-old mother's just come out of hospital, and I had to rebuild the house to set that up. I'm a functioning insomniac. I'm not being able to do my normal workload, which I feel guilty over because I'm ill. I was running late and had to run up 3 sets of stairs to get here because you've moved from one side of the building to the other side of the building. And this is the alternate location, not the regular location my surgery's in. They've sent me to the alternate backup surgery. So I didn't really... I've only ever been here once before a long, long time ago, and you've moved. And you're surprised at and all the job stuff I've got going on, all those things. And you're surprised my blood pressure's high? Oh, and I'm also ill with a cough and a cold and have been for... I'd be surprised. I'm not surprised it's high. Did I find some iron brew in my blood in my iron brew system? They haven't yet done the blood test. Did love though it was interesting. It's an out of hours unit, and it had a nurse who actually knows me there, but the doctor I've never seen before. And a nurse went, now remember, please, when you're coming in for your blood test, for me to draw blood from the regular surgery, right? Can you do me a favour? Can you not drink iron brew for about 48 hours beforehand? Because I'd like to find some blood in your system. And probably not. I'll be able to handle 90 questions on some. If it's anything's like it, I'll have had 3 lives before we get to Sunday. So hopefully you'll see me getting better and better, because first day of having my antibiotics today, and I've got all the days worth of other pills. It'll have to be good. Thank you. So, Ruhnon has been proposing this for a while. And the question I came up with was, what am I doing to turn this into a longer video? Into an actual discussion. An actual live. And a log patrol. And how do I approach that? So the thing is, in terms of prototyping, it's kind of sad because there are literally probably 3 guns which are actually properly prototyped, and they actually do some prototyping on. And so those are going to go into the long patrol a bit more in terms of discussion. But in terms of the live, I thought it'd kind of interesting to look at the fors and against of the autoloaders. And before anyone else, it's not just me and my mum which have been ill. My sister was also ill. But the thing was, to quote the doc at the A&E unit who saw my mum the other day, when she went in for a checkup into the critical care units they have at the hospital, she checked up on her. They were not surprised, because apparently there's quite a vicious bug going round, and both my mum and my sister have quite strong asthma medication, so they're going to be fine with it. They said, does anyone else in your family? And I went, yes. Brother/son. Oh, bet he's been knocked for 6 by it. Yeah, I have been. It was great fun. I mean, literally. I was a snot volcano. It was just non-stop. Gross. So hence no lives. When you're having to sort of sit here, basically wipe your face with paper every few minutes, and then you can record for about 10 minutes, and then it's again wipe face with paper, and then record for about 10 minutes. Hi, Jack Ray. Right. Then Freeman. To be fair, and I will say this quite honestly, you are more fun when you're not on your meds, because you are far more wacky when you're not on your meds. And before anyone worries about him in terms of medical treatment, I'm not meaning wacky in that way. I mean in sense of direction. TMI. It's not the Clarke. Yeah. So, in all that, this is why the videos, which I'm considering putting them under the designation of snotted, drugged up, recording Dr. Clarke. So, now, ain't she pretty? Now, I actually have something I'd like to point out, and this is just a small thing, but if I quickly minimize this for a second, and I bring up both of these, and I stick them both in the camera, you can decide which one you think has the cuter picture on the front. Because I think there is actually a difference in how they've been reproduced and how they come through. But it could just be me being mildly obsessive. But, no. This is the new version. Oh. Yeah-da-da-da. I do like this book. I am biased. But I can do housework and things better on meds. Mm-hmm. I know. I know. I do know that. That's the shameless book plug. So, let's talk about autoloader turrets. And first thing you have to notice is, of course, the reason I've got this ship up here. Most famous for testing out the 8-inch gun in its autoloader form, and I think, frankly, one of the most interesting things that happens in history and diversions from history is if this gun gets pursued. If the 8-inch autoloader gets continued. And if... Well, think about it. Because if you're looking at... modern vessel, a modern vessel. A modern ship. Having an 8-inch 55 cal, or something similar gun on it, that would be a really, really powerful vessel. If you imagine the modern Arleigh Burkes having an 8-inch gun on them, and think about it, think about the range that 8-inch gun has. An effective firing range of 30 kilometers, pretty much. That's at least 29 kilometers, but probably actually effective firing range of 30 kilometers. In the 1970s. Imagine what a modern shell design system could be achieving. They had plans for rocket-assisted projectiles. They had plans for all sorts of things to be added to it. An 8-inch shell can be made all sorts of things. So it's really interesting. And then you consider the sort of space differential. You've got 5-inch guns aft here. And that's the joy of USS Hull here. she was carrying 5-inch 54 dual purpose guns. And you see, you can compare them in size compared to that. They're good systems, they're good guns. But honestly, the 8-inch Mark 71 doesn't take up a lot more space. Now, will you be going into autoloading 6-inch that goes to Type class? Yes. And yes. An 8-inch 55 with volcano cannon. Or an 8-inch 70 with volcano ammunition. That'd be quite fun. So, what are we talking about when we're talking about autoloaders? We're talking about mechanical aids, replacements, personnel that load ammunition into crew-served weapons without being an integrated part of the gun itself. As a rule. Extracts a shell and propellant charge from the ammunition storage rack compartment, loads it into a magazine or belt. The gun has one, or directly into the chamber of the gun if it does not. A small crew enables the turret to be smaller. So, basically, we're normally looking at these are the advantages we're talking about when we're talking about guns, because it makes them able to be smaller. Well, I'm just thinking, considering the utility of the 8-inch gun, it becomes a very different world, the idea of, and I'm going to go blow my nose, excuse me a second, I don't want to get snot all over you, and I don't know why, it suddenly decided to block up. When I come down to find snot all around, alright, good. Right, so, the 8-inch gun, if we consider its utility in the up to the 70s, if that had been continued with and put into service, when you consider the viability of an 8-inch gun in providing fire support for various things and its utility, and the very real enablement it would give you even compared to a modern 5-inch gun, but especially if you put the same development into it as a modern you put into development into a modern 5-inch gun, the argument of an all-missile ship would become very, very much less. I think it might have been more of a common to see these guns around. And then you have all sorts of interesting things, because if that's in the 70s, if the Americans are pushing in the 8-inch gun, the British might continue the 4.5-inch, they might go with a 6-inch, they might even go with an 8-inch themselves. They might get on the 8-inch train. And then that could have an impact on the Falklands War, which, depending on their utility, could then have an effect on modern ship construction. And we might be seeing some very interesting stuff going on. I would also say this. A 5-inch gun is a very good dual-purpose weapon. But it's a very good dual-purpose weapon in an era where the major war was going to be a naval war at sea. And it was going to be a major naval war where your primary threat came from submarines and aircraft, and you were balancing that. However, in a modern scenario, where we are increasingly looking at our VLS tubes being increasingly important for air defense, etc., and air defense, to the extent that anti-submarine warfare has become the helicopter's role. In many ways, again, pursuing heavy guns becomes kind of sensible because, well, you can load shells at sea. You can't as easily load missiles. Hello, Ruhnon. Then, given what is currently planned development for 127mm by BAE et al., I dream of what could be done with 203mm. It is kind of interesting to think about it because, A, the space you have to remember is cumulative. But also, you have to think about in terms of the 5-inch guns and the 8-inch guns. You have to think about the sheer amount of space you've got for other stuff that you can put in there. And yes, there's a lot of people looking at the anti-submarine warfare, thinking about the anti-submarine warfare round of the 5-inch gun that BAE are working on, and wondering what would happen if you made it into an 8-inch. It would be an interesting weapon system. Now the thing is, if you consider the modern 4.5-inch gun, the modern 5-inch gun, you know, if we consider the modern Mark 8, it's a good weapon system. It has a maximum range of 27.5 kilometers, officially. Now, again, we can think about that. What's the equivalent range of one of these guns back in 1972? It has a rate of fire of 25 rounds per minute. And its initial range was actually, how do I put it, 22 kilometers in 1972. It's the new rounds, the latest rounds, that allowed it to extend its range out to 27.5 kilometers. So you think, in 1970, when they were first testing this out in 1975, it's got a range of 29 kilometers. Nearly 30, but 29, let's say 29 kilometers. The modern Mark 4.5-inch Mark 8 with the latest greatest round has 27.5 kilometers range. Be interesting to think about how far that 8-inch gun could have got to. Yeah, let's go. Sorry, I was worried something was sticking down below, so I quickly cleaned it off. There's a lot of problems with wear of barrels. Barrel wear is a big thing for guns. It really is. Rail guns, the Chinese are actually working on something closer to a Gauss gun than a rail gun. Before anyone starts thinking that that's, you know, putting them down or anything, it isn't. It's just the differences between a rail gun and a Gauss gun is the way you employ the magnetic fields, okay? It's saying it's a different methodology, and the only reason I'm injecting it is because I like to be precise. When I feel precision assists, I go with precision. And the Gauss gun, theoretically, is easier to repair the barrel of and maintain a barrel. Theoretically. So, why am I starting off back in 1861? Why am I starting off back with 1861? Well, when the Gatling gun first appears in 1861, the first thing the Royal Navy starts to think about, is whether or not you can do the same with ships' guns. There's a scary idea for you. In fact, they actually use some ideas and testing of it. It doesn't really work out well, and the idea of mounting multiple 6-inch gun barrels, broadly speaking, doesn't really catch on much. But the point is, they're really interested in quick-firing weapons. They really are. They have to be. Because the thing for the Royal Navy has always been rate of fire. If you think about it, what was the thing that won the Battle of Trafalgar for them? Rate of fire. You can argue it was their positioning, you can argue all sorts of things if you want to, but the realistic reality that they're solving is rate of fire. The Soviet self-propelled howitzer is probably the most recent 8-inch, and that had 48 kilometers or so range. Yeah. Honestly, I think if we had a decent 8-inch gun around now, I wouldn't be surprised if we were talking about ranges for up to 50 kilometers. I wouldn't be surprised if we were talking modern weapon systems ranges of 50 kilometers. And if you think about that, you suddenly you're talking about a very useful weapon system. So yeah, the Gatling gun system comes in, and it's all about improving rate of fire. It's not... how do I put this politely? It's not really pursued, because it's very quickly worked out that such a weapon is going to be incredibly heavy and incredibly difficult to maintain. But believe it or not, then they come along with various other designs and other ideas. And lots of things go through, including an idea which is not too different to a pistol revolver. You know, revolvers which have a pistol, the pistol-style revolver system, which has the revolving chamber. The idea of having something similar to that for guns, for ship's guns, that goes around a lot. Basically, the idea being you load in at one point and it circles round. And so you can have the various things loaded in at different points. You could have maybe the charges get loaded in here, dun dun, and the shell goes in here, and it's just going conk, fire, and while it's firing, their loading takes place, and then they move around another line. Or you can, there was ideas where basically they would have it would go here, clean, at sort of this point, and sort of all your sort of 6 or 9 chambers was actually what some of them came up with, and it was almost sort of like chamber. Let's say chamber 1 is where you're firing. Chamber 3 you clean. Chamber 5 you'd load the shell. Chamber 7 you'd load the first level. You'd load load the charge. Chamber, let's say 5. So and sort of chamber 9 you do some checking, then it'll go in on fire. It's kind of a fun sort of system to work it through. Was it a 9 or a 10 chamber system? Was that chamber 0 or chamber 1? Might have been chamber 0, then it goes 1 and down. But anyway, The whole idea was you would have this sort of multiple barrel system. And it was kind of interesting because they sort of cocked it out a bit, because the idea was if you had 2 guns it would do. But it does have an interesting effect on the size of your turret. And if you think about it, the bigger the shell you have, the more complicated, more difficult, and more it's going to be, and how heavy that lump of metal is going to be. Points. Presumably a revolving ceiling system would have sealed the breach one of those large guns. Yes, there were various ideas about how that would happen as well. Various ideas for how it would happen. It sounds complicated. It is, but it was the idea was it would speed things up and lower the crew requirements. It didn't and didn't. And again, one of the things is a lot of this stuff appears on paper. Okay? A lot of these are bright ideas which are worked through on paper. There's nothing wrong with something being worked through on paper, but it does mean sometimes that it's never really thought through into the real world. It's never really turned from theoretical. Bad guy, weren't the Iowas supposed to get an 11-inch saber round for the 16-inch guns that they could shoot out to 100 miles in 90 minutes? I think there was something about that, but I thought it was a 12-inch saber, not a 11-inch. Now, Sir, a Colt reproduction of a Gatling gun you could buy. I think it was chambered in 45-70 several years ago at a local gun store for $50,000. Cool. Anyway, eventually though they decide that what they need to do is just make the breach mechanism quicker, and quick firing counts as 12 plus rounds per minute. At all times, under all conditions. To qualify as quick firing, that's what you have to meet. 12 plus rounds per minute at all times, under all conditions. Now, the quick firing 3-pounder Hotchkiss, of course, has a very rapid action breach, a very lightweight shell. A 3-pounder gun is 76mm. And no, 57mm. 3-inch gun is 76mm. 3-pounder, 57mm is a 3-pounder. And they are a capable, useful weapon system. But they're not able to do much damage. And of course, these aren't principal weapons. These are rapid fire weapons, but these aren't principal weapons. So then we come with the quick firing 4.7-inch gun. And this was an interesting thing because it comes out pretty much at the same time as the 3-inch, as the 3-pounder. Comes out not too different time. But this is actually more of a basis for what larger guns can do. First thing you start to realise is it has a fixed cartridge. A fixed shell and cartridge system. So all the ammunition is one. You don't have the variable options in terms of powder, etc., and charge you can put in. It's just this is the shot. Don't know, 60-pounder is 57mm. Oh. I was sure the 3-pounder Hotchkiss was a 57mm as well, but I'll check. Honestly, with the way my nose is blocked up, I could be completely wrong. Very confidently wrong, but could be completely wrong. You are right, it's a 47mm. Sorry. Now, this means, of course, that people start looking at how quickly you can make breach mechanisms work. And if we consider the Hotchkiss, well, the point about it and its breach mechanism is it's holding back not as much force. Not anywhere near as much force as this. Now, the 4.7-inch gun is all about breach mechanism. It's all about how quickly it can tighten up, fire, and then be loosened to be reloaded again. Everything is about the speed of that movement. Because you think about it, just having a breach, having it blocked isn't help. It has to be a block which can hold the force of the explosion to the other side. And that's the big part with a breach mechanism and a rate of fire control and a sort of auto-loading system. It's not the loading of the gun which matters as much as the sealing of the gun afterwards. All of that takes time. Yes, the heavier and heavier the materials that are going into the gun get, the more complicated they get, the more heavy duty they need to get, because especially if they're doing that maneuver under certain conditions at sea in rough conditions. All true. But, and this is the big problem, you need to seal that breach. Because basically, if you don't seal that breach, what you do is you get a explosive-filled turret, at least. And what you get most potentially is blowback, where the breach disintegrates and the shell goes off inside either the gun or the turret that was firing it. Interesting enough, the 4.7-inch comes in at roughly the same time as the 3-pounder 47mm from Naval. But it's, again, slightly more complicated. That sort of misfire sounds very unfun. It is incredibly unfun. Incredibly unfun. Sadly, it happens. Then you have the quick-firing 6-inch gun. Now, that starts off in 1892. And as you can see, comes in about 7 years later. So it takes about 7 years to work up to having a quick-firing gun for a 6-inch gun versus a 4.7-inch gun. Again, interrupted thread and various other things to try and protect it and seal it, but more importantly, and this is the more important thing, this needs to deal with many, many times the pressure. I bring up my notes. Okay. The muzzle velocity of a 4.7-inch gun, firing cordite, is 2,150 feet per second. The 6-inch gun is 2,154 feet per second. But when we consider the maximum ranges of the guns, and we consider the differing operations as they grow up, the forces you'd be expecting that breach to sustain could be as much as 3 times those of the 4.7-inch. Especially, this is going to sound strange, because again, they start off with a separate cartridge and shell system. Then they start to look at maybe a combined cartridge shell, but they sort of keep it a separate cartridge and shell, but it's still quick firing. It's still able to get those 12 rounds per minute. Theoretically. Realistic rate of fire, and therefore the rate of fire which is often offered for the 6-inch, especially the first variants, is 5 to 7 rounds per minute. That's the realistic rate of fire. Theoretical rate of fire was slightly more. I'd also point out that these guns are interesting because especially the first 3 variants are all wire-wound construction of their mechanisms. The British were always keen on the 6-inch gun. And why am I going with the British? Because for much of this period, if you're looking at the sheer amount of money, consistent funding, and enough companies competing over it that they're all getting involved, you're talking about the British gun industry. In this period, you're talking about Britain. The others are working on stuff, yes they are, but it's nowhere near the same volume. It just isn't. Oh, that's a 40 cal. And the shell was a 45 kilogram or 100-pound shell. If we again consider that compared to the 4.7-inch shell, that's a roughly 45-pound shell. So that's roughly 20 kilograms. So this is 45 kilograms. This is 20 kilograms. And on this one, the shell weighs in at a whopping 1.5 kilograms. So this is roughly bag of sugar weight shell. This is about a dozen or so bags of sugar. And this is about 2 dozen bags of sugar. I don't know. If they usually they're at 1.5, so it's about 30 bags of sugar. Depends on which make of sugar you're buying. If you're buying the kilogram, the 1.5 kilogram, or the 2 kilogram bags. So, again, realistic rate of fire has to come into this, and that's one of the things why. One of the things I do agree with with most of the sources which have discussed this later on. I've gone with the realistic rate of fire rather than the theoretical rate of fire which got at the original QF designation, because again, considering that's all human lifted, there is no way that you are keeping that up. You're gonna, without killing your crew. And it will be killing them. Excuse me a second, I'm just gonna blow my nose again. This is fun. I'm hoping after a few more days of drugs, I get better. They did dismount them and carry them around, yes. Pardon me. And yeah, the team. This is also one of the reasons why the gun teams grow quite so much. People often go, "Why is the the gunnery crew for a 6-inch gun so much bigger than the other guns?" And you go, "Well, it's because you need to swap out the loaders." So think about it, if you're loading this, and let's say you're loading an effective rate of fire of 8 rounds a minute. Okay, just to make my maths easier. Or 6 rounds a minute. So let's go for 6 rounds a minute. Okay. So once every 10 seconds. If you have a loading crew of three loaders, then that means you need, as a loader, you need to pick one up every 30 seconds. Promise, all the sound you miss in an edited video. Yes, you do. This is why I've been doing recorded videos rather than lives. Because it was a lot worse. A lot worse. Red ammo limit stores limits firing. Not as much as you'd think it would. Because basically the ready ammo store is supposed to last you long enough for gun ammunition to start reaching you. And that's where you have more people. So maybe you have 3 gunners. That's going to get 3 ready ammo, 3 loaders. You're going to have more than that on your loading team. You're going to have powder monkeys and other things as well to carry the stuff around. So you will probably be moving quite a lot of shells around your ship very rapidly. One of the things that I always find interesting is if you go to HMCS Hyder. Okay, have a look at her. Look at the deck. You will see the spot. You will see the various chutes where they pushed, where shells and things could be taken up to keep feeding them. And they had things to move. You had your action stations, and these positions might not be in place normally. But that's the whole point of ready ammunition. It buys you time to get all those things set up if you're attacked quickly. And to get those things, keep firing and maintain fire, and by the, they'll be set up very quickly and start feeding the ammunition up. How much did the 6-inch Mark 1 ammo weigh? We're talking this variant, the 1892. We're talking 45 kilogram, or rather 100 pounds of ammunition. Each shell weighed 100 pounds. Oh, I-55 and load 50 plus pound box for concrete a dozen per minute. But not being shot at. Mm-hmm. And not rocking about, I hope. So, we can go through World War One, but there really isn't much that takes place between this period and World War One, in that they would like to keep developing on these and keep working on those. But the first time you start hearing discussions about it in design papers is when we start looking at these. Now, this is where I'm going to really, really blow quite a lot of your minds. And it was also looked at for Nelson and Rodney. There was an idea going around as early as the F2s and F3s, not with the G3s, but with the F2s and the F3s, and the Nelrods, of trying to make their main battery auto-loading. Now, there is a debate as to whether or not this would be fully auto-loaded, or would be heavily, how do I put this, mechanically assisted. It's a rather interesting scenario, but there are reasons for this. If we go back to the ideas earlier, you can make the you can make the turrets a lot smaller, and you can make the number of you can reduce the number of crew. You can reduce, therefore, this amount of space that armor needs to cover, if you are prepared to use that weight for autoloaders. Now, the thing is, the reason why the autoloaders don't turn up, and I'm sure about this one, is because they're worried about their survivability in combat versus a more assisted loading system, which is what they go with Nelson and Rodney. I would add, there are some interesting points made about it, though, in the discussions. Hi, Stafford. No worries. Now, if you think about that, if they're considering auto-loading, they were also considering maybe trying to make them quick firing. And there was a discussion whether or not, with the 15-inch shells, because, and this was another reason in favour of going to 15-inch guns rather than 16-inch, so please bear me out. Okay, with 16-inch, they knew they would be heavier than the 15-inch. They also knew there's only a certain amount of weight you could build an autoloader to assist with, because of the weight of the shell. There is actually an interesting argument, a counterpoint made by a friend of mine, who hasn't published this yet as a book, but is working towards it, because they're doing a whole work on gunnery development, on the development of guns. That one of the reasons why the Royal Navy goes with the light shell, the light gun design, in terms of light shell design, for the Nelrods, is because originally they were looking at trying to make them auto-loading, and therefore they felt the lighter shell would be just about light enough for the autoloader systems they could design at the time to potentially work. I think that does have an interesting scenario, because if the British had managed to get an actual autoloader working at that time with those shells, then a lot of the arguments you see about the light shells on the 16-inch guns of the Nelson and Rodney would probably be people going, yeah, they're not as powerful as the super heavies, but the rate of fire. They're not as powerful as the super heavies, but the rate of fire. Is this assisted loading for Nelrods like that later seen on HMS Vanguard? To an extent. Now, again, you have to remember this is something that the British have been experimenting with and discussing for a while. Because for them, there are always the limits to the infrastructure they have available around the world. That means they're always having to think about what they can fit in that infrastructure. Anything they can do, therefore, to reduce the size of the ships makes life easier. In the case of this sort of design and Nelson and Rodney, if you can make them smaller, you will make your life easier. If you can. If you can't... Well, that's the thing. Again, with the 14-inch guns, we'll talk about those in a second, but again, they were considering autoloaders. I've talked about this before. It's one of the things which actually makes the King George V and the 14-inch guns make sense, is if the autoloader project, which it's working on, finally yields fruition. And one of the problems you see very quickly when you start looking around is the British don't actually really, as far as I can tell, I'm going to be very careful with my wording here. Despite many discussions and potentially quite a lot of opportunity, as far as I can currently tell, as far as I currently know, the British did not build a full-scale example of an autoloader for their main battleship scale, capital ship scale guns. This is despite having had an ongoing project from pretty much 1912 onwards. So much so I did consider it perhaps part of the Agincourt project. But I can't find anything linking those two, so I don't think so. I can find it being linked into the F3s and the F2s, design considerations. I can find it being linked into the Nelson and Rodneys. I can find it being linked into the King George V's. I can't find it really being linked into the Vanguard program. Next one, seriously, did the Agincourt project papers all get burned in 1942 or something? It seems like you and Drac are having a frigging nightmare finding it. Let's put it this way. We are more and more convinced that the papers that survive are incredibly limited, and therefore the papers that we need to find, we know they existed, we just cannot find them. So we're hunting them, and yes. O'Neill, a failure in autoloaders can be more difficult to clear out. Yes, that's pretty much it. That is one of the big problems. It's making not just an autoloader, it's making an autoloader that works under conditions of combat. And I think that's what stops it actually being included in the designs. I still would like them to actually test the build of thing, because, let's be honest, if you've got 14-inch guns autoloader, it's another thing of the rate of fire and sustained rate of fire you could have had with an autoloading system. Even if you got it just up to 3 rounds a minute, which you could theoretically do if you can sustain 3 rounds a minute under all conditions with an autoloader rate of fire. You carry 420 rounds per gun. Whoa, that's good. That's 140 minutes of firing per gun. Carry 120. Carry what? You know. So you're going to have enough to do. Let's see. An hour's worth of firing. You need to carry 180 rounds per gun. If you could guarantee 3 rounds per minute. The problem, though, they really have is selection of rounds. Because are you going to be selecting high explosive or are you going to be selecting armor piercing? At what point do you call an automated system? And what point is it a enhanced manual operating system? Because you need to have a human involved. You have to have lots of humans involved anyway, you know, and it might maybe not moving the shells, because let's be honest, the shells are heavy. They're really heavy. But you're going, whatever you have, you're going to need some humans involved at various points in it. Because you haven't got the machines to a level at which they can act for themselves. You haven't got those sensors in place. Modern shells can reach very far. I know, we're all sort of been talking about it, but if, again, you scale up for what an 8-inch shell could do. And yes, I do think if you've got 9 15-inch 50s which can each fire 3 rounds per minute auto-loading, I do at certain points think that people would be running away crying. I think most navies would be running away crying. I do seriously think that if the British had cracked the autoloader, which they were trying to crack, in terms of the F3 design, etc., there'd be a lot of people going, well, they've not built a 16-inch gun ship. No, they haven't. 15-inch 50s. Okay, yeah. They're autoloaders. What? How many rounds a minute do you say they fire? 27 rounds a minute from all 3 turrets. You can just imagine the US Congress now at that point going, and we allowed them to build these ones and they're within the treaty limitations. Yes. And they've built battleships which can outfight all our battleships. Any gun foundries involved in the project, Steam Richards? I'd say the only ones who possibly are involved are Ellswick. In terms of Agincourt, and in terms of the gun foundries involved, it seems to be Vickers who are involved in it. In terms of the auto system. From a well thought out prototype leads to development, then refinement, that actually works. Mm-hmm. Well, the trouble is, Dan Freeman, that once you're getting to the scale of shells you're talking about in capital ship shells and capital ship weapon systems, especially once you talk about 15-inch, 16-inch shells, how do I put this politely? The flight profile of a high explosive shell is different to an armor-piercing shell. So if you have it auto-loading, you're going to need to adjust for what shell type you've got. Sometimes you have to adjust the angle in order to guarantee to have this equivalent firing range. It's nuanced. Now, this of course is an Iowa system. And this is the problem once you start to get into Iowas aren't auto-loading, but they have a lot of systems designed to help them. Designed to move stuff around. Designed to allow them to rapidly load what they need to load. Yes, there's a lot of people involved in it. There really is. But I'll say most of those people that are on it and actually involved in it are either acting as sensors and watching what its automated systems are doing, or they're helping with the manual movement and selection of things like charges and ammunition onto the correct belt to be picked up and taken up. But once they're loaded up, they're in there. So really, once you start talking about it, once you start considering the auto system is not as complicated or as problematic to develop as we might think. In fact, from the purposes of the capital ship guns, because so much is already automated because of the size of the things they're moving around, that you'll have to consider what sections you have to automate. You're automating this section down here. Sorry. The collection of charges. And you're automating the collection of shells. Now, that is where the process becomes difficult, but that's also what you've got to deal with. So again, this is the point I'm trying to make with this slide, and this point in discussion, is we're not talking about something that is a million miles away from what was already in service and what was already being put in together. We're not talking about something which is beyond the ken of humankind. We're talking about something which is complicated, yes. Difficult, yes. Impossible, no. Green gunge. I don't think there's any green gunge come out of you just yet. Just gonna get a drink. Oh. Oh. Now, but given all the problems with heavy, high-caliber shells, why didn't they go for offloading the secondary cruiser cycle, such as the 5.5-inch? Well, it's A, building such a mechanism into a ship, and it's B, and this is the more important point, is it's the selection part of it. The difficulty is working, especially once you're dealing with the dual-purpose guns, because they tend to have a high explosive or arm-piercing shell variant. They are more likely to have variable shell operations. Do you want to select star shell? And that's the problem. That's the thing that's factoring against you. Once you have variety, that's what's factoring against you. What you'd almost be looking at is having a system in the shell room where you message down and go, load this, or you press the button and go, boom, I want this. And so they make sure that's loaded. And they press the button selecting it. Or they're just selecting that the right thing is being loaded and checking it. It's... Or you need some sort of ready stowage the rest of the ammunition room is feeding into to just maintain. It's the complexity is there. It's doable, but the complexity is there. Actually, what's your main goal incompatible with autoloaders? The insistence of sliding versus interrupted screw breach. It certainly made life more difficult from the idea of it. It's a case of it's possible, but it's more difficult. And as Lion's pointing out, you don't have the modern barcode ammunition cassette that you do these days that allows you to pick which ammunition type you need easily. It's possible to do. Both of what you've described are basically the system used the Russian Chinese tank designs. Exactly. It's possible. It's not necessarily easy, but it's possible to do. And everything is a factor of scaling and metallurgy. As said, yes, there are actually advantages and fors and against in both in terms of the sliding and the interrupted breach. I would say once you're into a more than a 2-gun turret, you probably would be better off going with an interrupted screw breach rather than a sliding breach, but I can still understand you going that way. Did they have punch card pneumatic systems? What about a reserve spots in the magazine for certain systems? So the autoloader can only select from those areas for needed ammo. That's again another option you can do. But again, think about it. How are you selecting that ammunition? Because I think about some sort of claw going around picking it up. Well, that's a whole lot of technology which you don't have in this time period. Because if you think about it, when you're dealing with cranes and things going across factories, they're all usually being manually controlled. That's none of the automated systems we take advantage of today. So, basically, my theory is any system which you have down here, if you consider how they have it, they almost have a conveyor belt going on with tubing running. You would almost need that system sort of set up. So that basically you could go, pump, it gets popped out. Maybe something works its way along the system, pushing them out as needed. And they get pushed on the conveyor belt, taken from the conveyor belt to, and then dumped into the drum. The drum then does it once the drum is full. You could have that set to a certain scale. A pressure some sort of weight sensor, or would be possible in this time period. What else would be possible in this time period? Would a light sensor be possible? Not really, because we don't really have that technology at that point. You could. Well, this is the point. You probably want a human watching that, so they can shut off the pumper, and they can then, once they see that reaches full, go press a button, boom, load, done. And another one comes around. It's a lot easier to sort out today. Farewell, been in a L'Oreal plant with an automated material handling stuff, a big vending machine but with shells. Yes. But again, those are quite modern systems. And again, all this stuff would have to be scaled up for the size of gun you're dealing with. The size of shell, the size of ammunition you're dealing with. They color-coded the shells X and had humans doing the picking. That's pretty much it. That's what they go with. So jukeboxes were invented in 1889. Could adapt that system. There were certain variations of a jukebox going around and being improved, so yes, you do have some options there. Oh. It's one of those scenarios where there are lots of potential options for how to deal with this. Lots of potential options. I would say, how would I do it? Well, okay, so I think rather like's been said, I would have it very, very strictly controlled where the stuff was. And I think that's how they would have gone with it. And so it's sort of preloaded. You then are going to have it monitored. You can automate it to an extent and maybe make it sort of a little train system whereby they pop the things down and then it runs around and collects them. The thing is, reliable. You can probably make that secure enough that it won't get stopped by anything short of penetration of a magazine, at which point there's no real worry. If it's not working at that point, nothing's going to be working if a magazine's penetrated. You need a quarter of each magazine to deal with half charges. Because you'd have to be able to manage to charge, you'd want them pre-made charges. So you'd want full bags of charge and half bags. Potentially. So you could go 2.5 bags or 3 bags, etc., depending on what you needed, etc., for your fire. You need to be able to send down a signal saying, well, you already can do that, but you need to be able to send a signal to the system saying you want 2 charges, and it's to select the next 2 or 2.5. That's beep beep beep. You could have that go to the humans involved. You see, the trouble is, once it's going to be automated, but to what level is it going to be automated? Is what you're talking about, because it's not automated to the extent we would think about it today being automated. You're going to need a lot more humans en route. You're going to need humans watching the machines. Basically, the difference is you're going to make it so that the humans aren't having to actually touch anything themselves. Storing the ammo horizontally, not a good idea because it might roll about. You tend to store it vertically and vertically and tied, so it doesn't roll around. As you can see, it's stored on the turret rings. Now as you move the ammunition into place. That's going to be more complex. Storing the ammunition actually might be easier than the powder. Honestly, might be easier. Certainly possibility of it. Let me just expand this out a bit to look at it a bit. Yeah. Again, it's doable. It's like if you've watched through HMS Belfast, it's doable, it's just not going to be easy. Now, Ruhnon, you can probably leave the charge bags to the humans. They're light enough and the powder rooms are generally large enough to give a 3 rounds per minute system enough bodies. Potentially. As I see, so World War II autoloader will be manual actuated, so there will be a gun who presses the button and executes loading sequence. Probably. More than likely. What you'd be talking about would be very much a manually actuated system. Post-World War II. Well, World War II kind of illustrates again the sheer power of the guns. Now, I know, because of the amount of amount of comments I see on videos of this, there are many people who will tell you, will honestly turn around and go, well, World War II is... Oh, good lord. Sorry, someone very strange has decided to comment on something. Oh, goodness gracious me. Right, we're not getting into that one. But someone's just put a comment on this thing. Small point. 1,000-year Reich is a millennium an Aryan expression. The German regime was not operating under normal rational assumptions, but in a so mystical cult of will and destiny, in which all they had to do was believe and do the right things to reveal the new world. Any sailing leader ruling Germany from 1934 would not have been aiming at world dominance, but looking to build up German economic muscle. Yeah. But the thing is, they did think they were going to be around for 1,000 years, and they weren't sane. Oh. And it isn't a millenarian expression. It's an actual expression used by people at the time. But we'll leave that to one side. Now, despite what many people said, and the reason I looked at the comment section was to find the most recent comment saying it, there are so many. Aircraft carriers did not sound deaf knell of the battleship, really. It was more a debate over which was the more cost-effective. And again, this is one of those things, is that post-World War II, they keep developing the stuff and keep working on it, because what happens if the Soviet Union developed their ships? And this is normally where I start to point out that I'm fairly certain the next generation of capital ships, if the Soviet Union produces produces some battleships or battlecruisers, the American and British responses to them, the British response definitely, will more than not likely be built around auto-loading capabilities. More than likely. Because if we consider how enhanced the systems have got, the assisted loading systems, by the time of Vanguard, and what was put into the King George V and what we put, you're already heading a long way down that road anyway. So the fact is, they would probably set up to what they would consider at the time autoloaders. Lance, I think you probably have to keep manual up to the point where the ammunition goes into hoist to take it up to main gun deck. Thanks to shells and powder, I think, is being manual. Well, the thing is, that's the point. That's basically the system you're dealing with. If you are considering what's going on up in the rest of the gun turret on the Iowa class, But that's not considered an autoloader. Because the whole point is, you're just moving where you're loading the shell. You've got to remove that point, at least the shell, probably, if not the car, and hopefully the charges as well. You've got to organise that, to mechanise that at least, to make it into an autoloader. I'm not sure I'd want any sort of electrical power to be running through a shell, which is loaded with a high explosive. Even a low level voltage, I just would not be keen on that in any way, shape or form. Even if, you know, people told me it was safe, I would just not be keen on the idea. It's kind of like, same with the powder, I just wouldn't want a electrical charge running anywhere near it. Once you've got the shells and the hoist, honestly, it doesn't matter what gun you're dealing with, whether it's an autoloader or a manual loader, you're not taking those shells down. So let's say you're going, we want to change the high explosive. The next two shells loaded in the hoist system are all armor piercing because they're already loaded into it. Well, from the one after that will be changing. The idea of instantaneous changing of shells is pretty much not really a possibility. Even with the 6-inch and 8-inch guns, with their systems going on, it was a case of, we could load from the ready ammunition if we have it. You have the ready ammunition stocks there. You can try and do something that way, but no. What's the maximum loading angle firing for the gun? Again, this is the point. But the technology there is a technology there. I don't expect auto-loading is going to increase that ramming any higher than necessarily than it already is, because again, that's the level of technology you're dealing with. I was asking, would auto-loading turrets get their own auxiliary power units given running in case of general power loss crush it? Well, if you consider the turrets already have to have that, because again, one of the things I'm trying to explain is that there's also already quite a lot of automation. If you look again at this design, you'll notice that the guns are not manually rammed. There's a power ramming system. And the hoists, etc., are all powered. All the systems which get the shells up there and the cartridges up there are all manual. The rammers are all, well, they're not manual, they're automated. They're machines. The rammers are machines. All movement of the turret is machines. Could you stick the ammunition you don't want back in the ready racks, then expending it as it comes up? You can, in theory, in practice, consider that. How are you going to get the ammunition out of that? This is the point. How are you going to get the shell out of there? You need a crane. Think about it. To get those shells out, you need cranes to lift them up. You're not going to do that. You don't have a crane in there to do it. You're just going to fire the shells and then fire the one you wanted to third or fourth. Don't you, is it Des Moines an autoloader if the shell powder was manual? That's an interesting question. It's autoloader according to the times. it's also one of the things of why you stop having ready ammunition in most of these big guns, because frankly the ammunition, to get the ammunition up there, etc., it's just too heavy. You're not going to be loading it yourselves. It's far easier to just let the system do it. Crane and 5 other incredible hogs. Yeah. It's a massive trial to get it up and get it in there. And this is the thing, post World War II, rate of fire is still going up. Why? Because, as said, they want to make things more viable, they'd like to reduce crew needs. But also there is this idea that if you can get the rate of fire high enough, then the 16-inch and 14-inch and 15-inch guns become viable anti-aircraft tools. We'll be getting into the Des Moines system. Then, I see the true autoloader becoming more and more suitable to cruiser caliber weapons or below rather than capital ships. Certainly is a lot technologically easier. But you again find an interesting thing in that the reality was the focus for much of the Royal Navy period of the 1920s 30s was on the capital ship. I don't think the Des Moines is an automatic ammunition handling in the magazine. I think it was just assisted loading. The gun just automatically loaded. Now, we're up to the 6-inch Mark 5, as it's called. Now, why have I put this in first? Honestly, because it's smaller. Honestly, because it's smaller. The weight of the rotating structure is 171 tons, each gun weighing 7 tons. The mounting can train at 40 degrees per second, a speed it achieves from standstill less than 2 seconds. Firing is achieved at 17 rounds per minute per gun. It can discharge the following every 60 seconds. 2 tons of shells, half a ton of cordite, and 1,300 weight of brass. A spent case on the gun deck. When these cases strike the deck, they remove 100 inches of green paintwork, which does not please the forecastle petty officer. Each shell travels at 1,656 miles per hour, and at the point it leaves the barrel, is spinning at 1,096 rotations per minute. Revolutions per minute. If the gun fires continuously for 26.5 minutes, which is possible given how it was impossible given how unreliable they are, they would discharge all the ammunition on board, 50 tons of shells and 38 tons of cartridges. When full, the hoists hold 2.5 tons of ammunition. They were originally designed in 1944. It was suspended and resumed in 1948. Came into service in 1959. Although the barrels are provided with water jackets, continuous firing caused the barrel's muzzles to become very hot, and manual water spraying had to be used to cool them. I kid you not. People with hoses.
Now, of the 6 Mark 26 turrets used afloat, 3 used RP-15 hydraulic control and 3 used RP-353 electric control. Tiger had all electric control, hydraulic control. Blake had all electric control, and Lion had one of each. Now, let's see if I can get the other picture to come up of the Mark 26 and its mounting arrangement, because it didn't like being on a slide earlier, so I want to try and put this in separately. And come on, work for me. Okay, wrong image, right image. It's behind everything. That wasn't supposed to be the case. Yay! It's now in front of everything. That's also not supposed to be the case. Building. So, this is the Mark 26. And as you can see, it does have some level of automation of things. But the main reason it has a level of automation is once we start looking at this. You can see the various shell rooms. The shells are loaded in to the hulls and can quickly be grabbed. It's firing as much of a worked up system as possible. What I love here is they also have a shell embarkation hoist, so they show you how they get the shells down to the various rooms, and this is how then they get the shells up again. They have a lower shell room, an upper shell room, trading machinery compartment, all those facilities. And the whole point is, each shell is loaded up with a cartridge. And that's how they standardize it. Whilst they still have... How do I put this? Each gun has a pusher hoist for cartridges and 2 pusher hoists for shells. One for high angle and one down for low angle shells. Okay? The cartridge hoist fed from a cartridge ring held 21 cartridges, while the shell hoist fed from individual shell rings, one above the other, each holding 72 shells. Expended cartridge cases were ejected via the chutes to flat cover ports in the gun house face. And that was the original design for the Mark 25. The Mark 26 is based on the Mark 25 and is similar. Loading was via hydraulic rammers at any angle of elevation. That was the idea. Basically, the idea is that it should be able to fire at elevations of up to 78.5, potentially 80 degrees from -5 degrees. And the idea originally had been to fit them on the Neptune class, the Minotaur gun, 3-gun version onto the Neptunes, which would be the Mark 25s, and 2-gun versions onto the Minotaurs and the Tigers. And it's firing a roughly 60 kilogram shell. Technically a 59.9 kilogram shell, but let's be honest, that's 60 kilograms between friends. It's 100 grams. And it's a 15.6 kilogram standard charge or a 31.8 kilogram cartridge charge. Cartridge cases did tend to actually be made from steel rather than brass because it was cheaper. And in more of an abundance. Look how that's with really autoloaders 1901 Gulf War. The 60-inch shell bombardment from 9 barrels really need a high rate of fire at that time. Not in the Gulf War, no. Basically, it was a case of, what the friggin' is that freight train passing overhead? That freight train is coming on towards me. What is that freight train? Oh, friggin', that's 9 16-inch shells. Oh, good lord. Someone trying to make a 16-inch gun an AA weapon is just having a fetish for large fireworks and practical weapon systems. Think about this from perspective, okay? I just want you to imagine this. You've got a swarm of 100 or 150 drones coming in. You fire a single 16-inch airburst flak shell. How many of those drones are still going to be in one piece after it goes off? I think USS Salem is the only autoloader system you can visit, yes. From memory. And then you have, well, the 8-inch 55 cal Mark 16 gun as fitted to the Des Moines class. I do like the 8-inch 55. And I find the Mark 16 guns as fitted to the Des Moines class to be really quite an attractive system. They're 450-ton turrets, but they are quite gorgeous. And the whole purpose of them is really to have enough firepower to be able to be the strongest cruisers. They were supposed to. The whole point was to have to be able to sustain 8 shots per barrel per minute. Now think about that. They could sustain it. The sustained rate of fire for most 8-inch cruisers was closer to 4 rounds per minute. Talking about doubling that rate of fire. I want to talk about the initial rate of fire. We're talking about a sustained rate of fire. 6-inch guns, they could maintain a rate of fire of up to 10 rounds per minute. But let's be honest, 8-inch shells are a lot heavier than 6-inch shells. And you don't have that much more crew, i.e. to wear out. The whole purpose of these things being built is in many ways is a proof of concept. It's a proof of concept. It's also possibly 3 of the most powerful cruisers ever conceived. I don't think they could fire their whole ammunition stock in about 10 minutes. But because I think they carried more than 80 rounds per gun of 8-inch. Although I'm not 100% sure how many they carried. I don't think it was massively more, but I think it was more than 80 rounds. It's the trouble with taking many drugs and coughing as much as I am doing it. It does make me tired. It's one of those things. I can yawn, but I don't go to sleep. This is with the drugs, okay? So please note that. Before anyone starts going, you're tired, go off to bed or anything like that. No. I find myself yawning on the drugs, but I do not go to sleep any more than I normally do. So yeah, it's fun. Yeah, I think they did carry. I can't find the stats for them in terms of how much they actually carried. But I did find a very interesting article in Popular Science about them, which I enjoyed reading, but it didn't really have details I was looking for in terms of the number of the number of shells. But if you would like a link to it, and the link I found, I will put that down below. Just checking I spelled Des Moines class correct. If the auto 18-inch guns are available earlier, the auto canals can be different. Let's be honest. If any powers were going to have the auto 8-inch guns, and let's say if either one of them had it, the other one would have got it as well. It's going to be America and Britain. And if they have auto 8-inch guns during World War II, there are going to be a lot of very different battles. Because if you think about it, if the British have an auto 8-inch gun, then their entire calculation on Belfast and Edinburgh is different. In fact, Belfast and Edinburgh might end up having 9 8-inch automatic guns, rather than being designed around 4 quadruple 6-inch guns, and then getting 4 triple turrets, 4 triple 6-inch, because that would sort of fit. So you'd have Edinburgh and Belfast would be town class variants with the new 8-inch autoloaders, and because they could fit them on them if you think about it and think about the criteria. 150 rounds per gun on Navy weapons. That fits in with what I've just found as well. So yeah, I don't think they go through their rounds of 10 in 10 minutes, but would that be about 50? Let's put it so, if it's 8 rounds per minute. That's let's be nice. Let's say it's roughly 17 minutes. Roughly 17 minutes. And sorry for the random question, but I've been thinking a lot about Kingdom of Fifth Class. Let's imagine the nuclear tech for ships have been a thing in 1935 for the Royal Navy. How much would that have changed the game, and would the Royal Navy have kept the ships after World War II for a lot longer? Or do you think they would have still been worn out? I think if they're nuclear powered, especially be the larger ships to be nuclear powered, you have to remember once you have nuclear reactors in, they'll probably still be worn out, but they won't be as worn out. And there'll be differences in them. Because if you've got nuclear reactors as a factor, yeah, I don't think they necessarily got rid of as quickly. Because they're still nuclear powered. It's a case of, it's going to not cost you much in a fuel budget. You're going to have nuclear-powered carriers as well, and you're going to need to keep up escorts at a minute. It's either going to be build a new generation nuclear-powered cruisers, which you might have a couple of going around, but you might not have had. It depends on how much size and space you need for your nuclear reactor systems, or keep your capital ships to be your nuclear-powered escorts for your aircraft carriers, and probably the British just do that. Although if we presume autoloading 8-inch, that implies also autoloading 6, which brings back the into the 6 versus 8-inch debate. It does, but it also doesn't, because if you think about it, again, you've got that rate of fire. How quickly are you going to go through your shells? If you're talking about, if you manage to achieve 8 rounds a minute consistent fire from an autoloader for 8-inch, I can't see you getting less than, well, the Tiger, HMS Tiger was getting 17 rounds a minute. So that's what you're getting from a 6-inch. 17, 18 rounds a minute, right? Think about how many rounds you need to carry to maintain 18 rounds a minute. For you to be able to fire for 20 minutes, you're carrying 360 rounds per gun. If you're carrying 360 rounds per gun, you've got 9, let's say 12 6-inch guns. So it's good town class design. And you're carrying 20 minutes worth of firepower for those 12 guns. You're not carrying 3,600. No, yeah, 3,600. You're carrying 4,320 6-inch shells. Or you've got 9 times 8 times 20, which is 9 times 160, which is, let's be honest, 1,400, yeah. Uh, 1,440 8-inch shells. So 4,326 inch shells, or 1,440 8-inch shells, which is easier from a logistics and economics perspective. So that it becomes, the rate of fire is one thing, that's great. Once you're into a rate of fire which is 18 rounds a minute, you have got a lot of issues in terms of the number of shells you can carry, and in terms of what that's going to limit. Because again, with you decide you want to be able to fire for more than 20 minutes, okay, fine. You want to scale up to your firing to, let's say, have 40 minutes of firing for Guadalcanal. Okay, so that's 2,880 shells you've got to carry. If you're a 6-inch gun ship, under that scenario, you've got 8,680 shells. 8,680 6-inch shells. Now, I'm going to do a little bit of maths here, because I'm going to actually start scaling this up a bit. But please note, that means I have to per minute 18 8. Let's put this away. Weight of shell. 6-inch, 8-inch. So, that shell weighs in at, in armor-piercing terms, 152 kilograms. The 6-inch shell, 45 kilograms. So, number of guns. $20 minutes, 40 minutes, 60 minutes. $20 times done. Okay. Equals times and divide by 1,000, so I can work that out in tons. Yes, this is literally what being an academic is like sometimes. You literally are doing Excel spreadsheets on the fly. D2 times C2 times D2 and C2. That B. Times G2. That's B. Sorry again, this is just me doing them, trying to figure out the maths and get the maths right. 9G. And that's B times I. So, if I do a quick screen share of you all, and if this works, which it should do, but we're never 100% sure, but we'll always hope it works. Window, properties, share my Excel spreadsheet. There we go. Oh. I was wondering where the Excel spreadsheet was going. It's supposed to be being shared. There it is. Hello. Sorry again. So, as you can see, you have a scaling of a problem. Your 8-inch shells, in terms of numbers, that's far fewer fuses to produce, etc. So it's actually quite a lot less complicated. For not much more tonnage overall, in terms of accommodating aboard your ship, to provide you 20 minutes worth of fire. Once you're at 40 minutes worth of fire, well, tonnage aboard ship, 6-inch shells are less. They're only 45 kilograms per shell. But they are going up in terms of volume. They are going up in terms of volume. And you're talking about 10,800. And then once you decide you want to have a full hours of firing, you're talking 12,960. You might as well be carrying 13,000 shells per ship. You will also be firing 583.2 tons worth of high explosive at your opponents. That's tons of high explosive. And yeah. It's always fun to create these sort of tables. This is the point. You know, at a certain point, the rate of fire of a 6-inch gun makes sense, and as I've said, putting much more shells and high explosives down. And this is all, of course, with 12 guns instead of the 9. So you've got 3 guns to your advantage. If you took that down and let's say you only had 9, you were Crown Colony class style, well, very quickly you still get an advantage in terms of number of shells thrown, but you're far lower in terms of high explosive thrown. And that's a big point. If you go with twins, 4 twins, well, at that point, things get very, very even. Things get incredibly even in terms of tons of high explosive thrown. Because let's be honest, that's a difference of 0.16 tons. That's a difference of 0.4 tons. 0.48 tons. Would it be possible to select a firing rate? Potentially. It's going to depend on how you've set the system up. How you set it up is going to make the impact of whether you can select a firing rate. World War II fired short salvos to get the range, and against like bomb streams, if they found the proper solution, they just kept pumping. Yep, and it's the same with almost all firing at this point. If cruisers had Denmark Strait had auto 18s, would they join the battle against Bismarck and Norway? It's going to depend again on their orders, and they're likely to take those orders. They're being held back because of the roughness of the sea, but also Holland's orders. It's one of those things again. It depends. Your units around you are going to affect what you have on your disposal. If there'd been Trouble-class destroyers, they wouldn't have been as held up as the other destroyers have been. And Trouble-class destroyers were on the whole probably less likely to take orders to not engage the enemy than anyone else. And they still did take the orders to break off when it was daylight so that the battleships could get in and do their job. But they had by that point expended all their torpedoes. Well, let's be honest, if the British and Americans have autoloaders, the Germans will probably spend years developing autoloaders as well. And the point is, the British and American autoloaders will probably be not as perfect as the German ones, and not as great as the German ones if all the parts are working, but probably a lot less complicated. Kind of like their engines and everything else, and probably will actually, the German ones will seize up quite often. Shells did count to into the sand displacement. And 13,000 6-inch shells at this point is, yeah. It's a case of, it's the sheer space to accommodate those 13,000 shells. I'm obviously thinking about it from a from a tonnage perspective, it's about the same. But from an accommodation space, I'm expecting to take up the space taken to occupy to store 3,000 odd 8-inch shells is going to be a lot less than the space to accommodate 10,000 6-inch shells. And that's also, it's near enough 11,000 6-inch shells. And that's actually, that maths is throwing me off. I'm worried about it. Oh yeah, that's 50. That's better. That makes more sense. That was at 50. I'd done the wrong thing. But there you go. That makes more sense. The others are right. But still, 2,500, you know, that's accommodating in terms of tonnage. That's what? 0.32 tons more in terms of weight for a ship in the treaties. That's a rounding error. But there's only 2,500 shells to find space for versus 8,600 to find space for. That's what you're talking about. It's the size of a ship, and it's the amount of space it has to be to accommodate all those shells. And as Stan Freeman has pointed out, the standard ammo load does, but many people lied, and so standard ammo load is 80, but had room for 150, for example. Yeah. I don't know. Now, it's a case of, at a certain point, what you would probably be looking at is individual ammo storage spaces for each of those. Again, I would say 20 minutes of firing time would not be considered enough. I have the feeling they would argue that one, but I reckon... let's see if I can insert and insert. Copy. Oh, that's fun. What have you decided to do? Why have you do? That's no helpful. I'd like you to. I'd like you to have maintained your system. Let's 20. I want you 30 times C2 times D2. And D and C. Yep, that's alright. So, that's grossly wrong. Why have you done that? I have no idea. Why do you... That's just... Okay. That's supposed to be FB3, B2, isn't it? That's more sense. And that's more like it. I'm reckoning, to my mind, if it was going to be anything, it would be roughly that in terms of they be aiming for carriage. Because if you look at the number of shells they carry and the rate of fire, usually it's roughly about that. So roughly aiming for roughly that figure. So again, you've got a case of 1,920, which, well, they've either got to, in each magazine, for each of the turrets, they've got to store well, for this one with 12 guns and across 4 triple turrets, each of those turrets would have to store 1,620 rounds. If you were each of those sort of magazines, or if they had double magazines for each one, that'd be 3,240. And for this one, which has 9, so they're divided by 3, you'd be talking 640 rounds per room. That's still a lot of rounds, but it's not out of the realms of anything when you're talking about, well, 640 rounds per room. There's 3 guns, so they line that down. That's roughly 200 and something per gun. Sorry about that. OBS decided to disconnect and reconnect itself. I have no idea why. And Des Moines is not treaty. It really isn't. But you'd be talking about 2,160. So you'd be talking, for each of the 3 turrets, you'd be talking 720 rounds. So 240 rounds per gun. I have no idea what that was. And why a gun just fired, which is normally a Twitch stream thing. So I do not know why OBS just disconnected itself, reconnected itself, and then had a Twitch stream shot fire. So this does go some way to explaining why the Tigers only had 2 twin turrets. Exactly. You don't think I'm doing live on Twitch as well? Honestly, don't think I'm doing dual broadcasting. Now, again, Lion says your problem again. The moment you have this sort of system in place, the moment you have this here, you then have to decide, right then, how much AA are you going to have, how much high explosive you're going to have, how much armor piercing you're going to have. Are you going to load 10 minutes fire of each? Are you? Do you want to load slightly more? Do you want to load slightly less? It can get very, very complicated the moment when you have multiple ammunition types. The moment you have multiple ammunition types. And it might be you just go, right then, so I want a standard high explosive shell, which can also be used for AA. Take care, Richards. And an armor piercing shell. That might be what you do. You need about a third more space for the 6-inch shells. Yes. It just gets... This is all the discussions around these things, why they aren't pushing them more. Is literally the complexity of the ship design that goes with it. The spacing that goes with it. What you're going to do with it. You can argue the modern rate of fire of the modern guns is one of the reasons why they have single gun. They're all single gun designs, because it's the amount of shells you'd have to store, the amount of ammunition you'd have to carry, in order to give them a requisite, relatively useful rate of length of time for firing, because it's suppression fire. It's just, it all adds up. Everything adds up. No, I want to go. Bum, ba-dum, bum, bum, bum. And that one. Now we've got next. Yeah. And this is ultimately not something which has gone away, the rate of fire debate about autoloaders, etc. Because if we consider with missile systems, the reason that VLS have come in place is because you can fire them more of them at the same time. If you consider that by having them loaded this way in the magazines, well, because VLS shooter systems are pretty much magazines, your rate of fire is limited to how quickly the missiles can clear the tubes. That's it. There's no mechanics in it at all. In fact, often these lids can be blown off. They don't even have to be flipped. They just blow away. They can be blown off if they need to, if they want really rapid firing, or they have mechanical sets and they just flop up, and boom, 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 they're launched. They are gone. And you can quite literally empty your entire VLS magazine in seconds. Now, if we look at the publicly available, sorry, I'm making sure I'm using the publicly available data, so allow me to please just bear with me while I check, because I'm double checking what I'm going to say. That's annoying. Double checking. Quadruple checking, because I'm not. That's definitely not what I'm allowed to say, because that's on. That's ahead on that paper. So I'm not allowed to use that. No. Thank you, Lockheed Martin. Your usual sales pitch has frig it all. Now, theoretically, you can fire from multiple 8-cell sections simultaneously. That's a theoretical, but it's not often done. The rate of fire. Oh, frigate, no, I can't use that document either. Oh, good lord. This is the trouble having done too much work on these things sometimes. Theoretically, this is according to a Dutch Navy website, they can empty a 24 VLS cell system in under 8 seconds. This is compared to an ARM system, which could fire 4 missiles in 9 seconds. Thank you, John Shea. So, the point is, rate of fire matters. Now, there is always the argument when you come down to effective rate of fire, which I've talked about before in a 60-second short, versus rate of fire, the realistic rate of fire or effective rate of fire. Now, the fact is, when you've got a shoot control system and in target engagement system, you can have a debate. You can have a discussion over what is more useful. Because you could, you can say a practical limit today of most modern VLS systems is their fire control system and how many missiles they can control in the air at the same time. What kind of engagement range they're dealing with, etc. That is a more practical control effect on them than the VLS. And some people tend to use that argument to argue in favour of ARM systems because they go, well, therefore you could have just launched enough using an ARM system. It's not really the case because you see the thing is, it's far better to have the ability to instantaneously launch and be able to launch more than your targeting system can manage than it is to be limited by both your targeting system, both your fire control system and your launch system. And this is the thing when we're going back to guns as well. I would argue the thing that really caused the death knell of large guns was the focus on AA warfare, anti-aircraft, and rate of fire being the priority of that. If we consider rate of fire for anti-aircraft is the critical thing, it's the critical capability that you think about. Result. Shall we go with it being a very interesting 30 seconds for anything flying within 25 miles? A lot bigger distances than that. Now, this all becomes a rather interesting point to get to, but basically, naval forces have been from pretty much 1861 onwards pursuing methods, mechanical, physical, mechanical, biological, all the methods, to increase rate of fire. This is part of a consistent move because it has long been realised that the people who get the first shot on target, get the most shots on target, are most likely to win the fight over the people who get in second and get in the fewer shots. It's been a consistent scenario. And it has in some ways driven down the size of guns. In some ways it's driven the size of guns in terms of their growth. Because I would argue it's the rate of fire versus the quality of the fire, i.e. the value of shell which hits, which leads to the divisions in certain guns. It's why the 10-inch gun doesn't really work. Let me explain that. So, the 10-inch gun, as I often pointed out, has the same rate of fire as a 12-inch gun. But it doesn't have the hitting value of it. Whereas if you go down to a 9.2 or even 9.4-inch guns, they have the same rate of fire as an 8-inch gun, which is a lot faster. If you consider that earlier, the manual 8-inch gun we're talking about consistent rate of fire of 8 rounds a minute. Whereas a 10-inch, 12-inch gun, you're talking an effective 2 rounds a minute. And that pretty much holds the level, especially as technology increases, up to around about 16.5-inch guns. Once you get above 16.5 inches, that's when you start to see the drop-off. Even with the technological level of sustained rate of fire. So there's a lot of claims over certain guns over 16.5 inches over their rate of fire. The reality is no. Now, the thing is, it's once you start dropping down, if you consider once you get down to 6-inch guns, you're pretty much to be able to talk about a sustained rate of fire of 12 rounds a minute. 4.5-inch, 4.7-inch guns, you're talking 15 plus rounds per minute. And this is when they're still manually loaded. Because they're that much lighter, that much easier to move. And you can, in many ways, take out the systems you need to replace the humans in them. Because a lot of the reason the machinery is being developed, and the autoloaders, a lot of reasons why the focus is on the larger guns over the smaller guns. You got focused on the 8-inch and above guns rather than the 6-inch and below guns in this period is because they're trying to improve their rate of fire because, honestly, for the rest, the autoloaders are having to compete with humans, and the humans are faster. And that's the big thing for the Royal Navy. When they are testing out some ideas and designs in the 1930s, the humans are faster. And that's the factors that come into it. It's, to an extent, it's a value for money thing, but it's also, as said, it's a factor that navies well understand. If you get the first hit on a target, if you hit them faster, if you hit them harder, you win. They lose. The first person who hits and the person who keeps on hitting wins the fight. again, they can start talking about the Battle of North Cape, which I recently did a video about, and all sorts of things, on Armchair Admirals. And we can talk about, again, the Battle of the Bay of Biscay, discussed in the same video. The fact is, the rate of fire of the 6-inch shells proved devastating, because they were enough firepower hitting their targets to cause damage, and they were coming in enough volume that they actually hit the target. So, right, I'm going to say you have that's sort of where I was planning on ending this and putting it up to questions about topic, and I would say about 20 minutes of questions, if people don't mind, because I think about 10 o'clock I'm going to turn into a pumpkin, or rather I'm worried the drugs are finally going to give out, and I'm going to be having a coughing and sneezing fit in front of you all, because I do know what it's been like the last few nights, in that it's slowly been getting better, which is why I risked tonight's live. Tomorrow I'm going to rest up to just a recorded video, and then there's another live going to be on Thursday night, and there's going to be a recorded video Friday. Although I might do a Twitch stream. I might see if Gareth is free, Garius, for a joint Twitch stream on Friday. He did message me about something, so I might see if he wants to do something like that with Hearts of Iron. And if that's the case, then Saturday there will be another live. The recorded videos that will be appropriate for for Thursday and Saturday will go out on Monday and Tuesday next week, so that'll be Christmas Day and Boxing Day's videos, just because I don't have time to write and get everything ready that I have been planning. I do apologize for that. The videos will come. I will organize the videos and the release, and they might be added as extra throughout next year. All the videos promised will be delivered. Just give me take a bit more time to do them, and basically this you've got the video tomorrow will be another key ships. The video Friday will be the long patrol for this video, probably, and then as I said, it'll be recorded video on Monday, recorded video Tuesday, and then another recorded video Wednesday, and then Thursday will be the next live. So, questions. Would doubling the Aegis system on a ship be possible so that it can handle twice the amount of missiles? Without getting into too much detail with what's currently limiting on Aegis, I would say the current existing Aegis systems have a room for improvement and scope within them. I would say the trouble is funding and getting all the systems to work. And the fact is, I would say that trouble is, like a lot of systems, the peace dividend has held up a lot of the long-term investment and a lot of thinking about how to improve these systems. I would argue that Aegis has been deserving of a lot of funding. Excuse me, I'm just going to blow my nose again. For a while. Sorry about that. And you can see that with the way that Aegis, which was really, really world-leading, is still world-leading, I would argue, as a system. But there are a lot of systems within the same ballpark as Aegis now. Not least being the British system on the Type 45 destroyer. And I would argue that's a very, very good system. The Type 45, the system on the Type 45 destroyer. It's interesting seeing them working together, because whenever I've seen a Burke with Aegis or a Tico with Aegis, and especially the more upgraded ones, working together with a Type 45, the pairing does make a lot of sense and does assist each other. Yeah. But it's a case of, with Aegis, it's more a case of the real problem for Aegis is that for it to be properly upgraded to what it could be, someone needs to give it a completely new architecture to work from. And by that I mean ship architecture. And the fact is, you've got the Tico design, which is the flower of 19... Ooh, goodness gracious me, technology in decades. And you've got the Burke design, which is, goodness gracious me, probably 1960s and 1970s shipbuilding technology when you look at them. And yeah. You need to give them something new. You need to give them it's power systems, it's cooling, it's how you support the computer infrastructure on the ship, it's how you support the other infrastructure on the ship. All those things need to be looked at to really get the best out of Aegis, which can be got out today. Boris, do you really think you think you're being realistic? Are you taking it easy when you're only recording? Oh yeah, recording's much easier because I can pause the video when I go off and make the noises. Blowing my nose. Far less embarrassing. And I do it earlier in the day. And I take longer of it. Usually usually for well, it depends how many takes I do. If I try and do it as pretty much one take with minimal edits, it's sort of it can take less time, but you know, try and make them as good as I can. And I never understand the sound thing, because I do the same sound work, same work with every single video. It goes into a program I have, which allows me to edit and polish them to YouTube level. Which is called Movie Maker Video Editor Pro. It's a nice, fundamentally sensible, simple piece of software. It works really quite well for me. I've used it for several years. It goes into there. They get stitched together to the high quality standard. They get their audio polished and upgrade and times by 1.8 to make it 1.8 times louder, and then it gets uploaded to YouTube. Make sure there should be announcements about Armchair Admirals. They will be happening again. There are more coming. Me and Drac enjoy doing them. We have got to figure out how to do more joy videos, and we've got to actually record a bilge pumps. We were supposed to record one on Monday this week, but I was in the doctor's, and my mum was in the doctor's, and I was actually honestly just feeling too ill at that point. I'm better now. Haven't touched the Autoloader today, Autoloader 76 today, because honestly, I was thinking this was far more focused on the big gun caliber West systems. Once you get down into the sub 3 inch, you're almost dealing with cannon. We've got that's one of the things you've got to get. We actually haven't. One of the things about ship shape is we do need to have some actual meetings, and we've managed to keep missing those because of various illnesses. And here's the fun thing this week, okay? So last week there was also things made of. We've got a home meeting. Yeah, we'll have one on Friday. All right, all right. Simon. Yeah. The people who showed up were me and Dan, and we're both the sick ones. We're going. Yeah. We're here. The others were apologetic and busy. We understood it, but you know. How high a caliber could the pom-pom system reach? Probably you're talking about 57mm, 60mm being about the limit of it for pom-pom. In terms of its shaping and its design. But 40mm is always going to be about the sweet spot for it. Ticos are great. We did have a nice natter. We did, Dan. Ah. We've got some interesting things going on with the houses. We are... I'd say in house hunt terms, the thing I'm really looking for is a space which has a decent space for me. In terms of sorting out my books, etc., etc. In terms of personal level. It's got to be decent for Mum, but yeah, been looking at a very specific property recently, and we're still placing bids on the property we have been placing bid on and sort of talking with them about it. And it's nice. It's a nice property, but it's ooh, what's it called? Stags. Yeah, there you go. I don't want to give too much details away. Because the whole point is it's the potential home for us. But one of the cool things about it is it has got a very interesting and very cool well in it. There aren't many properties which have... can I show anything without revealing the location? That's the trouble. People could do image searches so easily and find out places. But no, it has a well in it, which is quite cool. And it has a few other things in it. Nice big gardens for the dogs to run around. Decent sized annex space for me. But we'll see. We'll see what happens. It's where I would like us to end up, but it's going to be a case of what happens. Honestly, there is a company in the UK called Bishops. If you don't know them, I'm not sure how you don't know them, but they're very, very good movers. And if you're in the UK, and thank you, Steve Richards. And yeah, bishops do well, and bishops are probably who we go with. They would move everything. They moved everyone else in the family when they need to move. Take out Mark Arness. Ooh. Good luck for the cleanup. Oh. Any questions? Do bishop movers only move diagonally? Sadly, no, but I am going to make that joke to them probably more times than they're going to be happy with. Because they are, yeah. They do actually have a chessboard as their imagery. So they've embraced it. They have embraced it. Oh, good lord. Right. Also, I've also already discussed this in parts, but what's coming up next year, as said, is the year of the aircraft carrier. And basically, like, it will be modelled on the year of the cruiser in terms of structure. So every Tuesday there'll be a different aircraft carrier to be discussed, or aircraft carrier or class of aircraft carrier. I'm going through filling it up with class of aircraft carriers first, and then I'm going to add in. When do key ships call response videos resume? When I'm able to sit in front of the computer long enough to record them as well as the daily video. You might notice I've been either doing a live or a single recording per day. When I can sit in front of a video of here long enough, and I'm not coughing so much that I can actually record multiple videos in that length of time, I will start recording multiple videos. Trust me, you are dealing with a workaholic. I would be doing it if I could. I think that I'm possibly not coming out this week, but who knows. I will have a chat with the gents to see if we can't schedule something in. Maybe we'll be able to get something organised for Friday morning's recording, in which case I will do my level best to get it out on Christmas Eve. Right. I'm going to say thank you very much, everyone. I'm going to go find some more liquid and probably someone to grab a snooze. Because I don't seem to be sleeping, but I do seem to be snoozing, which is okay. Thank you, it's Morrison. Thank you, DJ40. Thank you, Jack Ray. Thank you, Black Mountain Experts. Thank you, Calvin Gasberg. Thank you, 9661. Thank you, Dan Freeman. Thank you, New York 4472. Pardon me. Thank you, Ruhnon. Thank you, Stephen Richards. Thank you, Mark Hartness. Thank you, Tanef Falka. Thank you, Abelzaski. Thank you, Bugguy8829. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Bijon. Thank you all. And sorry not to be as normal fun. I hope it's still enjoyable and useful. Take care, and thank you for watching. You got unsubscribed, Nights Ago, everyone. How? You comment so often on my channel, seriously. Take care. Thank you, Paul. I hope you liked it, Paul. And thank you, Maximus, and thank you, Just Vonk. Thank you, everyone. Yeah, da da da. Ba da da da. Thank you, Leo Gazebo, and thank you everyone else as well who's been watching. Thank you. Bye. And Stafford. Thank you.